Darren might have something to say, and then Helen's going to share with us some of the work that she's been doing locally, which is fantastic.
Okay, thanks, you.
Andrew. Yeah, I've had the joy of working with Helen for the last year or so, and the amazing work that's going on in that part of the world down in South Hams. So I don't want to steal Helen's thunder. She's far more easy to listen to than I am. So Helen, it's over to you.
Hello, and thank you all for inviting me today. So I've written a presentation to give you a background about South Hams area wellbeing that's known as SURE. We are a community interest company formed in 2018 by a group of like-minded individuals to help enable and educate local people to be resilient in their own well-being. Today we're made up of 8 voluntary trustees and myself. I'm employed as a community builder. We're based in Kingsbridge in South Devon, which is a market town of about 6,000 people with many outlying smaller villages. For those, so just a bit about the area, it's heavily reliant on tourism. If you don't drive or don't have access to a car, there's very poor transport links. Got a higher than average older population and documented levels of loneliness and anxiety and depression. So at its inception, SURE saw the value and impact that social prescribing had in other areas of the UK. So we wanted to replicate this in the area because there was no other provision. While social prescribing ethos was at its heart, SURE aimed to build upon the social capital locally with the aims of improving lifestyle, knowledge, happiness and health, and to shift from crisis intervention to helping people help themselves in the first instance. In 2019, we employed 2 social prescribing link workers who throughout their time worked with over 100 individuals. At their first appointments with people, they would carry out a questionnaire which would generate quantitative data, and 2/3 of these individuals referred to themselves as being isolated. The individuals were referred to the link workers by their GPs, and then throughout their time they'd work on a targeted action plan to enable that individual to engage with their community and build and develop relationships by being signposted to different groups and organisations that might be able to help. It was hoped that by developing those connections within the community that the individual would personally develop and increase their own resilience and well-being. I've got a quote here that somebody wrote for us a while ago about the support they received. SURE were able to open a door for me, and this proved to be a golden nugget for my well-being. Once I started going to the National Trust meetings as a volunteer, I suddenly felt a sense of purpose again, which helped my self-esteem and gave me confidence in life again. The National Trust have been really understanding and welcoming of me, and the Combat Stress Day at Overbex was really useful to be part of and contribute to. If it wasn't for Kath, SURE's link worker, I would have never found this opportunity, and would like to thank SURE for helping me and wish them all the best in their future with their vital work in the area. So during the link workers' time with us, the NHS ended up pledging money to GP surgeries to integrate social prescribing as part of their service offer. So for SURE, that then meant that South Hams CVS were going to, they were now contracted to employ the link workers and deliver that social prescribing service. So whilst it was an end of a chapter for SURE, we wanted to continue on our success and diversify the offer that we gave to the community. And that's where I came in. So I was employed as a community builder in February 2020, and we wanted to continue to engage with the community as a whole and those individuals that live in it. I adopted the asset-based community development approach to set out and map community assets and resources in the local area, and they could be things such as people, organisations, groups, buildings, events, anything that was going on in our community. The asset-based community development approach works on the basis that you identify those strengths already in place and you utilise these to further develop community spirit. I was also going to continue working alongside the link workers and we joke and say that I'm their eyes and ears so that they know what provision is out there, because they don't have the scope or time to be keeping their finger on the pulse of everything else that's constantly changing. Again, it was hoping that linking people, individuals with groups and organisations, it would build upon their resilience and support networks to keep them physically and mentally healthier. So obviously we all know what happened last year, and 6 weeks after starting we were placed in lockdown. I'd already developed relationships with the key groups and organisations in the area and developed a community database. But now that I was working from home, the community that I was meant to be working with were behind closed doors. I had to adapt my approach to work to reflect the current pressures. So there were key things that I've done throughout this year, such as making funding applications for the local food bank, and equally working alongside other key organisations in the area to ensure that information was disseminated and that all the people had the right contacts and knew where to go. Supported the implementation of a prescription delivery service in the area. I also created a newsletter to go out with food packages for those not online. I was really mindful that we had a huge demographic in this area that didn't access anything online, so it's making sure those people had all the key information they needed, and some light relief in articles and games. And I also linked up with the local secondary school for them to provide input to it. I also worked in collaboration with Slapton Lee Field Centre to run a 10-week wellbeing programme. This was the only opportunity at the time for individuals to meet safely outside and connect with nature, and all the sessions were based around the 5 ways to well-being. And I also, with another trustee, secured some funding from Active Devon to deliver a range of free activities to the community. That's still ongoing, but to date we've run 3 lots of 10-week exercise programs online to people who live in the area. So, sure, moving forward, which is kind of a barrier to the work we do. Our main barrier to our continued work and success is funding. I initially had a contract for 12 months, and it was extended for 6 months, but this will finish in August, and unfortunately my time will come to an end with Shaw. Funding has been a really large issue for us, and that stop-start nature of work, kind of looking over your shoulder, and not being able to look too far into the future with what we could do in the community, being mindful that the funding wasn't there. We ultimately need funds to drive this initiative forward. There's still no one else providing this support in the area, and in order to develop the role. If you look to larger areas like Torbay and Exeter, you can see they've got the link workers and the community builder role hand in hand, and they've also got funding that has enabled them to become established in the community and be integrated in it. I'd just like to finish on a quote that says about the work I've been doing for the past 18 months with one of the link workers, just to give you a flavour of what's been going on. So this is from Rosie. So, having a community builder in our area is a huge asset to the social prescribing link worker team, particularly as we navigate the rapidly changing community landscape throughout COVID and beyond. Helen has helped many of my clients, not only with her in-depth knowledge of local resources. Often she can tell me exactly what an activity will be like for my client because she has been along and done it herself, but also by actively doing something about the gaps that we as link workers are struggling against. For example, in the height of the pandemic, we were seeing increasing numbers of people with deteriorating mental health owing to the sudden loss of the social groups that had previously been central to their lives. Although many groups moved online, Helen was the only person able to respond to our concerns that the bias to online support was in fact excluding a large proportion of the most vulnerable clients. The outdoor wellbeing programme that she delivered with Slapton Lee Field Centre was, for many months, the only face-to-face social resource we had access to. And so it was unsurprising how much positivity and hope it inspired in our clients and us. We see Helen as an extension of our team because she directly contributes to our outcomes and the well-being of the people we support. That's me.
Thank you very much, Helen. That's a fantastic summary of some real positive work. You've just made me feel really, really old, because I grew up in Kingsbridge, and when I was growing up, it was a town of 3,000 people. Which is quite staggering statistic for me that it's doubled in size in my lifetime. Has anyone got any questions for Helen, please? John Wormsley?
Yeah, forgive me, Helen. That was fantastic. And I'm John Wormsley. I chair One Northern Devon. So you've made Nick feel old, but actually it's made me feel sad, because you're facing the same challenges that we are in Northern Devon. And your wonderful stories there. I'm convinced that the personal stories are far more powerful as evidence than some of these hard metrics, which are very hard to actually really measure. So I reached the stage where I think maybe the NHS needs to look at itself and say the work that you're doing is health promotion, it's prevention, it's fantastic value for money. And perhaps in 5 years' time, we'll be top slicing 1% of the NHS budget and giving it to community-based initiatives, which could be very, very powerful to promote well-being. I could go on for hours, but I just want to say, well done. Keep going. You're a CIC, which is great. It's one thing we are not. We've met some challenges push us away from that, but actually well done, and keep going. It's a fantastic story, and we'd fully support you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. I've got James and then Susie, please.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Helen, for your presentation. It's very close to my heart. As well as being an Associate Non-Executive Director with the CCG, I'm also the CEO of Recovery Devon, and we have 3 community development workers across the county. What I'm particularly interested in right now is looking at the tendering process and the PIN, or prior information notification, that's just gone out about what's happening with the community mental health framework and where the funds could be allocated. Now, one of the things they're suggesting is an alliance or consortium of some of the smaller VCSE mental health and wellbeing providers. So we've just made an approach to Devon Communities Together to do so. But I'm also wondering if that would help some of the smaller organisations like yourself, and to a certain extent like Recovery Devon, because we are quite small, to jointly put in for some of the bids for funding, as opposed to what often happens is we don't get to hear about these opportunities till quite late, and then they end up going to some of the bigger players in the market. So that's one thing. I really hope that we can get this alliance off the ground and actually make it work for people. The second one was just on community mapping. You mentioned asset-based community development, which is very much at our heart. But I wanted to mention ADODL, just in case you hadn't came across it, because it's a community mapping tool that you might find useful.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, was it ADODL?
ADODL, yeah.
Okay.
I'll put a link in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, James. Susie?
Thank you very much indeed. So Slapton for me meant my A-level biology field trip, counting different bits of seaweed. Helen, I thought your presentation was absolutely fantastic, and the work is really important. And, you know, colleagues, as a system, we have to decide to fund what I think of as barefoot modern public health. I mean, that's what this is about, isn't it? And we have to do it across Devon, and we have to ensure that we are not only funding the best, but we're funding learning from each other, and we're funding some experimentation, which I know, John, has been something that you've been really keen on in North Devon. So there's a paper, Darren may be able to say a bit more about this, but there's a paper coming to the partnership board next week, which I think is partly about how we get funding for this sort of work on a more secure, across-system basis. And I really hope that we can persuade all the different parts of the system to put some money in the pot, not just the NHS, local authority organisations as well, because this has to be the way forward. And Helen, I'm really, really sorry to hear that you may not be continuing in the role, but maybe if there was more secure funding, you and people like you wouldn't feel, that you were taking up so much of your time just chasing the money when you could be doing the role.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you, Susie. Darren?
Yeah, it's just to follow on from what Susie said. The papers actually went to the joint executive team within the CCG yesterday, day before, and was supported. I think that the issue will be where does the money come from, as there always will be. But there's a paper that goes back to the partnership board next week where we can get a further view. But I think you're right. I think it's the direction of travel is that communities provide our front line in healthcare, and I think that the acknowledgement that that's happening is the sooner that happens, the better, really.
I think in chat, Graham Town has just put it brilliantly. He's written, let's pay for a fence at the top of the cliff rather than an ambulance at the bottom. I'm sure Swass would agree with that at the moment. Okay, Susie, is that a legacy hand, or did you have another question? Oh, thank you. Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Helen, for giving us your time. That's got us off a really good start this afternoon. It's just the positivity of your project just oozes out of you. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right, I'll leave you all to it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, that takes us on to questions from members of the public. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Elizabeth McElderry. Are you with us, Elizabeth? I thought you were joining the meeting. Maybe she's not here.
Nick, I think members of the public aren't right in the meeting, but it's being streamed live to them.
I see. Okay, right. Thank you, Nikki. I didn't understand that. Okay. So the question is, general practitioners with their wide-ranging training and experience can provide a speedy and expert one-stop assessment of patients. Noting the shortage of GPs, the worrying out-of-hours situation in Devon, the increasing use of paramedics, and the regional push for more and advanced paramedic training and employment in the community, is it the intention of the ICS, maybe with pressure from NHSE, that all outside hospital and GP health centre patient encounters through 24 hours will be staffed by paramedics, NHS or otherwise? So, Joe, would you like to give an answer to this for us, please?
Okay, yeah, I'll probably try and give part of an answer. It's actually, that's a different question than I had, Nick, but happy to start off on that one. So just in terms of the issue specifically around, so it sounds like it's a question specifically around paramedics. So under the additional roles reimbursement scheme, so that's a new funding stream that's come into primary care over the last 2 years. Primary care are able to employ paramedics to work as part of the practice. So some of our practices are doing that at the moment. In areas where they're doing that, actually they're finding that really helpful and supportive in terms of triaging and being able to treat and support some of those patients. But we are working really closely with our ambulance provider to make sure also that we're not destabilising the market as well. So the recent conversations that we've had with South Western Ambulance Trust, they're very supportive with working with us, and particularly I know in conjunction with working with our workforce ICS work stream, we're trying to look at what we're doing around rotational posts as well. So we're really keen that anything we do adds to what we've got. So it's not just about robbing Peter to pay Paul or just spreading the butter thinly. It needs to add to. So where we think that will encourage people to either come into Devon or to stay in existing posts maybe, then that's the area that we are particularly focusing on.
Okay, thanks, Joe, very much. Okay, so that takes us on to the minutes of the last meeting, which I will run through, taking matters arising and matters of accuracy as we go through, please. So starting on page 1, page 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, everybody happy with the minutes? And we've got a fairly long list of actions to run through. So a number of them are in progress. So I'll just focus on the ones that we're saying are open. So we've got number 3 on the list, new action to be open, feedback and learning from the patient experience story. It says they're re-volunteers for vaccination program. I think that was just from all patient experience agenda items. So the last one we had actually was Naomi Alam talking to us about the experience of other ethnicities in the local area. And I did follow up. I had a meeting with Naomi afterwards, and I've got some really good ideas from her about things that we could do to try and improve the way that we engage with people, and to try and make some improvements in our outreach to some of the harder to hear groups in our local community. So that's what I did about that. Then that's actually the only one, isn't it? It's still open. So I don't think we need to run through the ones that are in progress. They're just in hand. So I'll move on, if that's okay, to the schedule of what the governing body is trying to achieve at this meeting, which is just for information, and I'll take that as read. We will come back to that at the end of the meeting and see if we've done what we should have done there. So on to the chair's report. Paul, please.
Thank you very much, Nick. So I'll take it as read, apart from 2 things I want to highlight. And the first is that my thanks to you, Nick, really, because having asked by Jane to take on the functions of the Integrated Care System Medical Director role, as well as staying in my post as chair, it's only possible because you've agreed to step in as in your vice chair role and to do things like chair the governing body for me, well, for us all really, and to take on some of those commitments. So thank you to you for that. And I think what that does is that gives us a real opportunity to make sure that the clinical leadership model that we have in the ICS is based on all the learning that we've had from the last 8 or 9 years of CCGs, because there's much that we've learned and much that we've developed over that time, and giving me the opportunity to make sure that is incorporated into our future models, I think is really important. And then the last thing is really the last item, just for me to personally thank Rob Dyer. Rob's been part of our system first as well as an endocrinologist in Torbay, and then as the medical director of Torbay, and then over the last 3.5 years as the STP and then Integrated Care System medical director for Devon. Many of you, in fact probably most of you, know him, but he has reached the point where he wants to move on to new adventures in retirement, and so it's his last day in that role tomorrow. So I just want to express my thanks and gratitude for all the hard work and things he's achieved. Thank you, Nick.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Any questions for Paul on his report? No. That takes us on then to the Accountable Officer's report, which Simon is giving this month.
Yeah, so I'll take the report as read. The only thing I wanted to ask was, I'm sure unless you've been living in a cave, you will note that we have a new Secretary of State over the weekend. He is taking the time to get a full briefing on where we are with the health service, including the Integrated Care Service bill. So there has been a slight delay. We're not sure for how long, but that does mean that the reading of the bill won't take place this week. It was due on Tuesday, and we'll wait to see how long that is delayed for, but we're hoping it will come in front of the House at some point in the next couple of weeks. So I didn't want to say anything other than that, but happy to take questions on Jane's behalf.
Any questions for Simon? No. On the subject of the new Secretary of State, I guess we should record our thanks to Matt Hancock for all the work he's done over the last 2.5 years. Right, anybody else got any questions for Simon? No. So that takes us on then to the pathology collaboration agreement. So who is taking this? Because I've got strategic planning consultant in my
it's supposed to be Nick. It's Nikki here. It's supposed to be Claire Higdon, and I did check this week that she was joining. I'm not quite sure if we're ahead of time. She hasn't. It doesn't look like she's on the call at the moment. Are you there, Claire?
We are 15 minutes ahead of time, so maybe she is planning to arrive bang on time.
Yes.
In which case, can we move on, given that we do have our Director of Commissioning out of hospital with us? Could we move on to the mental health update, Jo? Is that okay?
Yes, very happy to, Nick. It's only a brief update. You've got a paper in your pack which gives an update on the last meeting we had of the Mental Health, Learning Disability and Autism Care Partnership. I should say that's the second meeting. That's of the executive group being led by Melanie Walker as the SRO for the ICS. As you'll see on the paper, there are 5 work streams that we're working to. Each now we're practically there in terms of identifying SROs for each of those work streams. We've got work plans that sit beneath those, which, as you'd expect, align to the long-term plan and the roadmap that we're currently developing and the game changers that we're just agreeing as a system. So the group itself is in its infancy, but the work that's going on underneath that is work that we've all been working on over the last kind of 12 to 18 months. I think in terms of the group itself moving forward, I think we've got the membership right now. So I think we will be able to pick up through that. We will be able to pick up some of those big game changers. And we'll be able to, as a system, I think, work much more effectively together in some of these areas to really start moving some of these things forward. So I'm just going to pause there. I'm not going to go through the paper in detail, but happy to pick up any questions.
Okay. Glynis, please, and then Simon Kerr.
Yep. Yes, thank you very much for this. Again, going back to the Quality Committee, an issue that we seem to discuss at virtually every meeting is of the waiting lists for autism assessments and speech and language therapy and other children's services. And I just wondered what sort of focus this group was giving to those issues.
Yeah, really good question, Glynis. So we will be reporting. So one of the work streams that sits underneath the care partnership is specifically looking at learning disabilities and autism. So that's chaired by Jo Williams, so local authority, DAS. They will be reporting through to the mental health care partnership in terms of progress against the autism roadmap and game changers which we've identified through the long-term plan process. I have to say feedback actually from the regional team, because it's worth mentioning it, was did praise the autism part of our plan. So we've got a good plan. We also know we've put significant funding into that area both this year and last year, and we will be reporting back through to that board in terms of progress. So they will have a line of sight, Glynis.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Simon Kerr.
Jo, I was just looking for a bit of an update on the urgent and crisis care and dementia pieces of work, because I don't think it's in this report. And I was reading through the report thinking, well, there's the first 3 specific areas of focus that are commented on, but I wanted just to hear about what's going on with the last 2.
Yeah, I mean, I won't, if it's okay, Simon, I'll take the detail with you offline, because I think probably that would be more appropriate. But yeah, what you've got there are the work streams that reported in through the last care partnership. But just to give you assurance that all of the work streams will be reporting in. Just very quickly, in terms of crisis, we are currently reviewing the crisis officer. As you know, we've put significant funding into the first response service, and both our providers have been able to step that up very quickly, particularly during the wave one of the pandemic, and continue to expand that service. We're currently doing a review of the crisis cafes and other services that we have to support people in crisis, and that's for children and adults as well. And just in terms of dementia, we are doing a system review of dementia services, and that's being led by the local authority for us.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Joe, very much. So I've now got Susie and then David, please.
Thank you very much. I know we have to talk in this awful kind of NHSE language about roadmaps and game changers, but it seems to me that in an area like this, it's really important to be absolutely clear what it is we're trying to achieve and over what period of time. And I would like as a principle to think that we are co-designing at every stage with people with lived experience. So can you reassure me about those?
Yes, be very happy to. Yeah, so actually that's a big part of the mental health and learning disability care partnership, is that we've got a group with lived experience as well. So others might want to comment, but they are and have been actually. So even before we developed that group, they have been working alongside us in terms of developing a strategy. The other thing I'd want to say as well, so in the development of the community mental health service framework, a big part of that was working with people with lived experience. So we do have a group that's working with us, and in fact they are part of the core group as well. So there's a representative that sits as part of that core group as well to make sure that we are working side by side with people with lived experience.
So I think the language we use and how we describe our work has to be absolutely accessible to people that aren't used to the kind of documents that we produce and have to read for ourselves. So I would have absolute plea that we use accessible ways of describing what we're doing.
I'm sure everybody would agree with that, Susie, and I know it's something that Charlotte Burrows would be saying in spades if she was here today. Perhaps I can leave Joe and Andrew to review the language we use in light of those helpful comments. David, green marking.
Joe, sorry, this is a question I've asked several times before, so you probably know what's coming. But can I just really make a plea that we tackle the issue of GP referrals that are returned without assessment? I think the first thing is to be aware of how many there are. So can we actually make sure we're counting the number of GP referrals returned without any assessment? And secondly, to actually look at a better way of dealing with it, be it insisting on a pre-referral triage or alternatives. In terms of what we were talking about, patients' lived experience, there's nothing worse than being told, well, we think you need a mental health referral, and then the referral coming back with no action and being told, no, you can't have one. So we really urgently need to tackle that issue. And I'm not saying that the answer is that they must assess every patient referred, but they need to deal with the issue, not just pass it back.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, David, in terms of how we work together to do that. I think there are two issues. The community mental health framework is absolutely meant to help us solve this issue, because it is really focused on how primary and secondary care work together, but also what's the offer that sits around primary care multidisciplinary team to help support individuals, which actually then wouldn't need potentially a referral into community mental health teams. So I think there are two things. There's one, absolutely completely agree with you in terms of what the correspondence, the communication, and then what the offer needs to be on the back of a referral, because we're working on the principle there's no wrong door into our system, but also what else is on offer in the wider system, wider community, that would help support those patients as well. So we will pick that up as part of the community mental health framework.
So can I just interject there, Joe? This is something I should know, but to my great shame I don't. Does the yellow card system cover mental health, or is it only for the relationship between primary care and the acute sector?
Yeah. Yes, my understanding yellow cards is, yeah, it absolutely does.
So would it not be appropriate for a GP, if he gets a referral bounced back, to raise that as a yellow card?
Yes, they could.
And then we could collect that data, couldn't we? And we would be able to present it to Devon Partnerships Trust as a.
We need to ask them. We need to ask them to provide it for us.
And I think that absolutely is the piece of work that we're doing, working together around the community mental health framework, to try and understand the pathways that people are taking, the referral routes, ways into the system, and what we can do differently and frankly better for those patients as well.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thanks, Joe. Simon, Care?
Yeah, it's a bit of an old chestnut, Joe, but I just wanted to sort of, now we've got the local care partnerships as they are, but I just wanted to, and we've got mental health as one of our rolling 5 themes that we discuss in our delivery group in the East on a regular basis, and we've got DPT engagement with that. How do you sort of see the work programs that we might work up in the locality around mental health necessarily or not being aligned with what's going on in the mental health care partnership, and if so, if not, if they're at odds, how might we resolve those odds?
Yeah, so first of all, I think that, the very first thing you said there, Simon, in terms of you've got mental health as one of your rolling 5 priorities that you discuss. You've got Devon Partnership Trust engagement. That feels like, to me, that feels like a massive positive and good progress. I think I can absolutely give you confidence that there will be alignment. So we've appointed, as you'll know, so Sonia Manton into the programme director role. Part of the work that she's done is absolutely around how do you get that line up between localities and the overall partnership group, and there'll be 2 ways in which that works. So there'll be things that you will discuss as a locality that hopefully will be, you will have place-based discussions and things that you can progress as a locality, but things that could be fed up through to us, which will happen by those representatives in the LCP. And we're just discussing now representation from the LCPs to sit on the mental health care partnership. But there'll also be things that as a system we will want to progress, and we need place to help with the delivery. So some of the discussions we've been having, and indeed I've been out to the primary care collaborative board chairs, will be things that can be supported at place level. So things like, how do we improve referrals into IAP services? How do we improve dementia diagnosis rate, physical health checks for people with serious mental illnesses? Actually, there's some things that could be really well done at place in those discussions, and that don't need to be system level discussions. And they're some of the things that we're starting to come out now to LCPs and say, actually, this is the data, and this needs to be part of the data set as well that you look at as care partnerships, and that not just being very much probably focused on the more traditional acute measures, but needs to be much more inclusive.
I think if we could take some of those, if you like, specific focus areas and bring them into the locality as areas that we would want to set as our priorities around mental health, then have discussions around how those areas would be delivered in our own locality, and then feed that back up to the mental health care partnership as ideas for a kind of support, approval, facilitation. That would be really good.
That's absolutely completely right, Simon, because it's a sort of ask and offer from both, really, and we're there to give, we're there with some expertise and support, but also, you're there to help support in terms of delivery as well. And one of the conversations that we've been having with our performance team is how can we make sure some of those mental health measures, as I said, are replicable at place level, so that we can have some of those conversations.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Simon. That's really helpful. Dr. Johnson.
Thanks, Nick. And it's really building on David's point. I think it's a challenge to us that we've just described a situation very much through the perspective of the clinician, as in, I refer, I get the referral bounce back. And actually, we need to be, it's quite a, you know, are we being too traditional in that thinking when we've got different opportunities with the community mental health framework, the additional roles, and the fact that they will be co-employed or co-funded by the primary care funding and the mental health trusts, to actually say, you know, are our patients' needs being met, rather than is a referral being accepted, and looking at being more creative in the way that those are met, because they're being sent back because DPT don't have the capacity to manage them, but they're being sent back to a place where primary care feel that they don't have the expertise to manage them, and there's a gap there. And rather than more referrals being seen when we haven't got the capacity to do them, and therefore those who really need to be seen urgently end up being put at more risk. And the other option, primary care holding risk that it feels uncomfortable doing in isolation. Let's just have a conversation, and I think, Joe, we've got to make the most of these opportunities to not think about a traditional approach of referral in, discharge out, in order to meet the needs of these patients.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Sheila?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Immediately before this meeting, I took part in a meeting between one of the GP practices in Plymouth and Livewell about their first response service. And one of the little nuggets that I took away was a plea from the providers that GPs get permission to share the notes from patients, because quite often the first response service are not able to see the records, and that makes it much more difficult to do an assessment and also to make a meaningful response back to the GP. So I think there is some work to be done on both parts, and I'm happy to pick that up if it's helpful moving forward. There were a couple of other things that came out of that as well, Joe, that aren't relevant to this subject, but perhaps I can pick that up outside.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sheila. Dr. Walmsley.
Thanks, Chair. So when we talk about the spectrum of mental health, this is where the community mental health framework is going to be so useful. And at the early stage of this spectrum, actually, people don't need a formal referral, but they need to be helped in some way. So our patients and our service users come along to a GP because they have something that needs a solution. Again, it's a plea for what Helen was saying earlier on with the patient story, that actually all of these community initiatives would be exactly where a significant amount of this help could be provided. And I put in the chat earlier on that we should be spending 1% of our NHS budget on these sorts of initiatives. And we are again talking about something where we risk building our lovely well-being centres, but not having a well-being service available in those centres. But these are community-led initiatives, and time again, we need to be empowering our community to provide the support for itself for these people who do need some help. So not the end stage of significant mental illness, but we're talking about much earlier problems that can be helped in a different way. So again, another plea that we actually look at the full spectrum of these issues and try and help individuals at an earlier stage, so we don't need that ambulance at the bottom of the cliff.
So just, if it's okay, Chair, I'll just come back on that, because I think it is important. I nearly mentioned it earlier on, John. I probably should have done when we discussed it, but James mentioned the VCSC, so the voluntary sector alliance contracting that we're doing as part of the community mental health framework. So we are specifically funding voluntary sector support. We will be going out for an alliance type contracts. We want the community providers to come together to help provide that offer of that early help and support. So I think there's a significant piece of work we are already doing as part of a national programme, but that we are doing to try and help support and fund the voluntary sector, but also recognising that that's going to have a potentially very positive impact both in our patients, but also for our providers in primary care and secondary care as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take Simon Kerr and then we should move on.
I just wanted to give you just a bit of a good news story, really. So in my PCN, we've got one of our practice managers who was a community mental health manager in another area before he came. He set up the most amazing primary care mental health team out of the additional roles funding that sits alongside our 3 practices. And then taking the vast majority now of all our mental health referrals and there's a lot of them that are seemingly have come to help us, which is fantastic. And just a story, one of the community, well, he was a mental health connector, which wrote to me, said, got a young lady I'd referred who was wanting a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, and I had a very useful conversation with him via task, which actually, me referring her to secondary care mental health to give her that diagnosis probably wasn't going to be half as useful to her as him spending 6 sessions with her around a goal-focused therapy approach, trying to get her to move forward with her life and engage with all the problems that she has in a slightly different way. So I just think that there's this kind of new offer that we're going to be able to put out to people through primary care, which isn't necessarily about that pathway that we referred to before about, primary care, secondary care, discharge back to primary care. There's a whole other offer, much more holistic offer that is going to come, I hope, out of the community mental health framework, pinned onto primary care, pinned onto PCNs, which will open our eyes as clinicians as to an alternative approach, which is already happening.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. Right, I'd like to welcome Claire Higdon. Are you with us now, Claire?
Yes, good afternoon. Hello.
Hi. So you're going to talk to us about the Pathology Collaboration Agreement, please.
Yes. So hopefully you will, within your papers, you will have received the board paper and the copy of the collaboration agreement, and also the initial work programme. So this is for the Peninsula Pathology Network. So you would have previously received papers in terms of our ongoing network development. So this is in terms of the ambition of establishing a collaborative network for pathology across the 5 trusts across Devon and Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. So the collaboration agreement is quite a landmark achievement in terms of we now have agreement across the 5 trusts in terms of working together in a more formal arrangement. This predominantly will be around clinical effectiveness and clinical quality. So the initial work programme you'll see is heavily focused in terms of having consistent pathology pathways wherever possible across the peninsula, looking to consolidate tests where that makes sense for the patient and for economies of scale, use of equipment, and also because of the workforce challenges that I know all departments face, but particularly for pathology and particularly because of the pandemic, that's been one of the key focuses that we'll be taking forward as part of the collaboration agreement in terms of how we can make the roles more visible, so people actually aspire to work within pathology, and also make more effective use of the workforce that we have. So the paper is here for you today in terms of, so you've got visibility of the ongoing progress. You'll see within the collaboration agreement, the governance is such that the Peninsula Pathology Network will report into the Peninsula Partnership Board, and then it will have 2 subgroups reporting into it, one of which is the Clinical Effectiveness Group, and one of which is a new group called the Operational Delivery Group. And that will, so we're about to recruit to the terms of reference, which went to the Peninsula Partnership Board on Monday, and we'll have a new composition of the Pathology Network Board from, I'm hoping from the 1st of August. We've got our next meeting in August, so we hope to have the new composition. And Paul Johnson is a member of the Pathology Network and is also the chair for the Clinical Effectiveness Group. Happy to take questions.
Okay. Any questions for Claire? No. Yeah, Simon.
Yeah, I just wondered, Claire, how aligned is the SEND group already? We're sort of treating them as one group within this collaboration. Is there not quite a lot of work to align those 3 different departments?
Yeah, so I think that was one of the things we struggled with in terms of bringing it together at the same time as other networks were sort of being brought together. So the way that we've attempted to accommodate that is that we've recognised SEND because the SEND Alliance is already out there. In particular, pathology, there is an established forum in terms of SEND. So there is a sort of, of all the specialty services, pathology is probably ahead of the curve in terms of that. But for now, we recognise the formal organisational status, and there will be the 5 members who will be joining for the 5 trusts. But at the same time, SEND, the actual development of SEND, is one of the major projects which we will have a regular report to the board, alongside the UHP Lighthouse Laboratory, which is another significant development for Plymouth, and the new replacement laboratory in Cornwall.
Okay, thank you. Susie, and then Nick Kennedy, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Claire, for this documentation. 3 brief points from me. You rightly talked about this making sense to patients. I couldn't see that reflected in the document, though. So, firstly, how are you going to measure the impact on patients of this? Secondly, I think given the move to ICSs, it would just be helpful if on the diagrams you relate the Peninsula Partnership Board to the broader ICS governance structure. And then lastly, presumably all the pathology services we're talking about, they are accredited by UCAS or under the UCAS system. And I just thought that perhaps we ought to make that assumption because, you know, that is the national system.
Okay, so to take those in order, so we will be using there's much more sort of patient narrative and clinical narrative in the terms of reference for the clinical effectiveness group. So that's sort of picked up there. And in particular, one of the reports that we are still waiting for it to be published, but it's imminent, is the Get It Right First Time pathology report, which will be identifying the areas that we need to focus on in order to improve patient pathways across the peninsula.
And does that include what you're actively going to monitor in terms of impact on patients?
Yeah, so with regards to one of the things that we're looking at with it, because it's quite difficult with pathology because obviously it's part of the pathway. So one of the things that we're looking at is developing a framework so we can identify sort of where you might introduce a new test or where you might want to alter the position of a test. What impact will that have in terms of the outcome of that pathway? And that's something we're actively working on at the moment in terms of how can we put together that framework so that we're focusing on the right things in order to improve. So far as actually monitoring performance, it's something which is an ongoing conversation in terms of what is it that we are looking to measure. So that's, I must confess, that's something which is still sort of out there. So what would welcome contributions in terms of how might we measure our performance. But at the moment, it's a bit transactional. It will be implementation of a lot of nice guidance and evidence-based interventions that have long been out there, but still haven't been implemented consistently across the peninsula. So that would be one of our first goals. And I take on board your point in terms of the ICS, and so I would ask if somebody can help signpost me in terms of where the Peninsula Partnership Board fits with ICS. That would be welcomed.
And then the last point was the UCAS accreditation.
Yeah, UCAS accreditation. I guess it's taken as read in terms of each of the 5 laboratories.
It should be, but.
Yeah, so absolutely. So I mean, and I think that's one of the things which each of the laboratories is absolutely keen to ensure is that we put quality at the centre of everything that we're doing and the accreditation that goes with that.
Okay, thank you, Claire. So Nick Kennedy next, please.
Thank you. A couple of points. One actually is it's sort of covered by Susie a bit around the governance. My question is more perhaps for Paul Johnson. The clinical effectiveness group, is that going to fit in within the ICS clinical effectiveness governance structure, or is it entirely separate, or will there be oversight of that? And the second question is, how quickly do you think you can move on to levels 2 and 3 of the collaboration agreement, if you like, to move up? Because starting with where you are, the level 1 is a good start, but it's not as far as I can see, that ambitious, and it would be good to see moving further.
So shall I take the first part, Claire? So on the first part of that, Nick, it sits very much within the governance that's articulated in the diagram here. I've been to one meeting and I'll continue to chair them and to get to know the work plan that they have. The majority of it is around that alignment of, of clinical case and clinical decision making within our pathology system, and actually that can be made within that space without necessarily the need for escalation. Its route for escalation will be the same as any other clinical forum that we've got, and as we get our our governance sorted, the integrated care system is likely to be through clinical cabinet, but that's yet to be confirmed. But I think you're right, there has to be a space where that can be clinically escalated, but actually the majority of it just needs to sit within that pathology space, because it's it's those operational practical things that pathology clinicians are best placed to sort and to manage.
Undoubtedly, I mean, although there may be unforeseen consequences on other clinical pathways and things, I suppose. But yeah, thank you. That's fine.
I mean, I think that's one of the things that we're learning in terms of, like I said, so we were asked to comment in terms of some heart failure approaches of referral sets, and then discovered that it was actually a pre-existing work stream that actually was leading on heart failure as a sort of a wider pathway. So there's been some, initial learnings in terms of actually how we fit in and how we align our work. So it's a point well made, Nick. And I guess our main thing is to try and get the message that we're there. There is a pathology effectiveness group, so if people want, either they want input into their work stream or want to come to our work stream to influence, then that's where we are. And I know that's something which Rob Dyer, prior to Paul, was banging the drum in terms of raising the profile. With regards to your comment about the network development, landing on level 1 has taken almost a year, so we're really chuffed to think we've actually nailed that one now. Progression to level 2, level 3 is definitely that's the direction of travel, but we're cognizant of all the other sort of developments such as SEND, the ICS, that are sort of happening around us, and the decision was taken actually. Let's get on with the clinical work. Let's actually make some patient improvements, and let's not get too hung up about the network development. Let's evolve rather than leaping to new management structures, which may actually, disengage people.
Thank you. Okay, fair enough.
Okay, thanks, Claire, and thanks, Nick. Susie, did you have your hand up again, or was that just a legacy?
No, sorry, I'm really bad at remembering to do this.
No, don't worry, it's fine. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Claire. I think this report was just for us to note. I don't think we're required to approve it because it's not a decision for us, really.
Extremely useful feedback.
Very useful to hear how progress is going, and well done on reaching level 1. I'm sure it's not good enough for Nick Kennedy, but it's a very good start. And I'm not sure I thought it was ever going to happen in Devon, so well done. And I suggest we take a 5-minute comfort break there if everybody is in agreement. So could we be back by just after 3:05, please? Thank you.
Right, John.
Yeah, not bad, thank you.
You're on leave, aren't you?
I am, yes. I'm actually speaking to you from central London. How about that?
Oh, are you? Fantastic.
Hello.
Hi, Nick.
Hi. That doesn't look like central London in the background, John.
No. It's deception. It's Exeter still in the background.
You're in a bar in London, aren't you, John? I can see.
Yeah, not quite that bad.
Am I right? You're an Orient fan, is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah, I was really saying that. Well, they got a pre-season friendly this Saturday.
I haven't actually looked at that, Nick, but I think it's probably still a bit previous. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, shall we continue with the local care partnership reports, starting up with the Plymouth locality update. Have we got Derek with us? Derek's not here, is he?
No, I think they only come, Nick, if we were doing a deep dive into a particular area.
Oh, okay. So we normally take these as read, but we'll just go through them and invite people to raise any questions if they've got any against them. So
I'll do my best, Nick, to answer if there are questions. I attend most of the LCP, so if there are some, I'll try my best.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Does anyone have any questions on the Plymouth report? No. The Scythe report.
So taken as read, but I just wanted to say that this is actually version 2 of this. We actually had a meeting in South Devon and recognised that the first version did not give an idea of how difficult the situation is, particularly in terms of demand, both in primary care and secondary care. And so actually this is the second version of the report. And I just really wanted to bring to your attention that was the result of people wanting it to include the negatives as well as the positives, to actually recognise how difficult the situation is.
Okay, thank you, David. The Eastern report. Simon, is there anything you want to add? You're on mute, Simon.
Sorry, I was a bit slow coming back to the meeting.
Okay.
I don't think so, Nick. It's all self-explanatory. Lots of good stuff going on in the delivery group meeting this morning and in the collaborative board discussions. I think, as I said earlier, I think what we're trying to do with the delivery group is to focus on 5 themes on a rotating basis and developing priorities for delivery within each of those 5 work streams, and then some actions which will underpin those so that we can see actually we're getting on and doing stuff. And really good presentation this morning around prevention, identifying 3 areas to focus on. So children's mental health, unpaid carers in the sort of adult working age group, and loneliness and isolation in older people's age groups. So 3 areas where we're going to try to work together as a group of providers, I guess, working within the locality on those 3 things. But actually a real, I suppose this has been brought up in this meeting, a real need to sort of prioritise some sort of funding for prevention to try and get upstream of all the problems that those particular areas then can lead to if we don't identify and manage them in a sort of proactive way. But I don't think there's anything more in the report than what's there, unless any questions.
Right. Thanks, Simon. Any Glynis? You have a question?
I was a bit concerned to see information governance raising its head again as a barrier to population health management or working together, because I thought we'd nailed that during COVID. So it's disappointing to see that that's stopping people doing the things that need to be done.
there are about 50% of the primary care networks in the East who have got past the sort of data protection officer concerns around sharing their data, and there's about another 50% that still want that final sign off by their DPO for sharing their data with the sort of wider system. So we're sort of working on that. I think there's various levels of confidence in terms of the ability to do that, but that's what's stalling the locality. We were given some assurance this morning that hopefully that will progress very rapidly in the next few weeks, and we'll get the whole locality able to work together on that. But I think it's getting hearts and minds to sign up to it in all the different parts of the locality.
Okay. I think we do need to encourage governance officers to focus on what is the actual outcome we're trying to achieve, rather than seeing data protection as something in its own right. I've got Joe and then Paul.
Yeah, Paul. I see Paul wants to come in as well. I suspect we're going to come in on the same issue, so I'll keep it brief. But yes, I've been working with our now digital lead for the ICS and also the CSU support that we've got working with our DPO. So I'm pretty assured that we're going to get there very rapidly over the next couple of weeks, but completely take your point, Nick and Glynis, about the fact that we can't let that get in the way of doing the right thing for the patient. But Paul might want to add to that.
Thanks, Joe. So I think let's just be really clear. There are 2 data protection officers who we fund as a CCG, but we don't directly employ, and their role is to act on behalf of our 120 odd GP practices. And their role is to make sure that whatever data sharing agreement or otherwise that we are asking practices to sign up for meet the requirements around data sharing and do not raise concerns. And so in a way, they're doing their job. It's a grey area rather than a black and white area. So there will be some who will accept various levels of risk for the benefit that we see of the patients. And we've got to work with that because we've asked them to perform a job. And we have been working with them. Simon, I'm more optimistic than you are that it's not a matter of weeks. I think we should be within a couple of weeks of getting this sorted. To be in a position where those data protection officers feel that the agreement that we're proposing is robust enough to protect people's data, but also to allow us to do the population health management work that we need to do. And Joe and I have got a call with the team tomorrow to check on the progress of that. And it's not just your locality, it's across the whole of the county. So I'm very optimistic we will get there. It's taken longer than we would like. But I'm just really clear. Let's just be clear that we've funded people to do a job and they're doing it. It may not be in the way that we would have liked because we're trying to get this bit across the line, but actually they are representing those patients and the patients' records and data protection.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Graham?
Thank you, Chair. Simon, quite a while ago now, the governing body had a presentation about the hub at Budley. I see that it's gone through a rebranding and is now called Sea Change, and your report mentions a review. Is there any more you can say about the review and what you expect to come from that?
I didn't actually attend the latest meeting because I was on leave last week. I think Joe may have attended that meeting and possibly one or two others did. Maybe it was Becky Harty. So I think they are becoming a community interest company at the hub, and they are looking to work in a different way that will make them more sustainable. I attended a meeting about 6 weeks ago, and with the financial director of the RD&E, who was very much encouraging them to come up with a different working model to persuade us that their hub is going to be sustainable. But I will give you the update, Graham, on where we've got to with that. Only that I know that there were CCG people in attendance at that meeting.
So Simon says he thinks there's still a funding issue around that.
Okay.
So Simon Tapley, do you know what the route to resolving that is?
So there are a number of options, but all of them require the statutory services to put some more funding in. So I, like Simon, haven't had a readout from the meeting that was held, but Becky was there, and I think Tim Golby's on holiday for a couple of weeks, so I haven't had a chance to catch up with him, but I will do, Nick. But I think it's what we're looking to do is make sure we're not setting a precedent, because we have a number of hubs or health and wellbeing centres that are going to be, the basis for our community services, both statutory and non-statutory. So we need to work out what's the right model and what's the sort of funding that we as statutory services should be putting into those. But I need to catch up with Tim.
Yeah.
But I guess I'd just make the point, Chair, that it's just a recurring theme, isn't it, throughout the afternoon, about preventative work and it being difficult to identify clear financial benefits, but we can identify lots of stories of positive change, and it's how we can translate that into something positive. Difficult to get up.
They have produced a report, Graham, which describes a lot of the activity they do and a lot of the benefit they think that they provide. But I think the stumbling block has been the issue and the financial issue and a sort of ongoing financial sustainability of their continuing to provide that service at a cost. So yeah, if the governing body are interested in the report, we can certainly send it round because we've received that.
Okay, I think it might be useful, Simon, actually, if we could all see that. Okay, I'm going to move this along, if I may. So we'll move on to the Northern Locality. John, is there anything you wanted to add to your report?
No, take all as read. I'll just reiterate what Graham said there about funding, and we'll lose quite a few employees or people we have been supporting at the end of their contracts will end before the end of this year, so we'll be saying goodbye to them. So our flow coordinators, our community developers and community builders will all be leaving us if we can't find some funding. So this is a question the NHS has to grapple with and has to come to an answer. So Simon, you said there that you don't know what the answer is. For me, I think we need to formally say we need to maybe start with 0.5% of the NHS budget is used to fund these initiatives, because they are fantastic value for money, and the hubs and the wellbeing centres cannot survive without top-down support. There's a huge enthusiasm from the bottom up. And I hope that we'll find a way to do this. So there are challenges in Northern Devon around our flow projects not being able to continue. Also, there's a lot of work going on around a new hospitals program, so everybody's pretty busy. And we've heard earlier on about the challenges around restoration and returning services to where we'd like them to be. So a lot going on, and in some ways it's more difficult to form a cohesive local care partnership when you've had something beforehand. You're now trying to create something which is slightly different, that meets the needs of the ICS, but also meets the needs of the enthusiasts who've been on the ground for the past 6 years. And I think trying to bring those two together has been a bit of a challenge. And in some ways it would have been easier to sort of start afresh. Like yourself, Simon, I'm envious in some ways that you have a blank sheet. So there are challenges, but I'm hoping we'll overcome those in the next couple of months, because the ICS would really like something firm in position, obviously, to be in shadow form by October, and we're working hard at that. So hopefully we can deliver that.
Okay, great. Thanks, John.
So Simon, if I can I just come back? Sorry. So John, don't forget we did set aside £2 million for prevention schemes. Those have been evaluated, and the feedback is a bit mixed on how much of a difference those have made. And you and I both know these are the sorts of schemes that don't pay back in 1 year or 2 years. It's important. We are all CCG corporate governing body members, and we need to remember, don't we? We are already allocating 112% of our budget. So we aren't holding things back from investing in prevention or community-based services. What we really need to do is have the right clear narrative to persuade our other statutory partners that some of the money that they receive from us would be more wisely spent in the community on the schemes that we're talking about. So I think we need to just be clear with ourselves. It's not solely our reluctance in investing in these issues, is it?
No. And without the IBCF, well, we couldn't survive this year for 3 months. So grateful for the support so far, but the amount of time that's spent by quite capable individuals trying to find more funding for next year and for 22, 23, and for the end of this year. Actually, it's a waste of their skills, and I'd like to have it a more formal system. And I think we're in some ways we're going around in circles, but we do need to address this issue.
Yeah, we are in danger going around in circles there, John. I think everybody recognises the need for health to revisit the way that it allocates money, but we've got to take that in the round with the pressures that Devon particularly is under, and the need to take 12% of our cost base out of anywhere before we can really have a sensible discussion around that. So we just need to line the ducks up in the right order, I think. That has generated a series of questions. I'd ask people to be quick, but I'll take James, then Graham, then Simon, then Susie, please. So James.
Thank you, Chair. And John, I read the Northern Locality report with interest, being from the North myself. I'm just interested in this community mapping, because I know a big part of the community developers work as part of One Northern Devon has been around mapping what's available locally from social prescribers and various community groups. I'm just wondering about the replication of this, because it's happening all over Devon. We heard Helen saying that much of her job has been about mapping her local area of Kingsbridge. And I'm just wondering if there's potential for resourcing properly a community mapping Devon-wide system that everyone can tap into. I mentioned Doddle earlier as being one example of that is, Devon, it's Devon ground up, and I know you're using that in Northern Devon. But if we properly resource and fund a community mapping scheme that works for the whole county, then we can perhaps stop all of these community developers having to do their own piece of work in their own area.
Yeah, so I can answer the question, the system-wide question. There's no doubt that having a sort of directory of services is very useful for our community developers and for the social prescribers, so they know where they can point people to get the help they need. So knowing what assets you've got in the ground is absolutely vital. I think out of this conversation will probably come a decision to do something on a Devon-wide basis, which would be good, and how you map your assets and what assets are more valuable, more useful than others. How we do all of that is actually something we need to look at. So I agree, James.
Okay, thank you. Graham, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is a bit of a change of tack, and I don't know if the question really is to John or to the wider system. But John, your report again tells us about the closure, excuse me, of MIUs in Devon, and I just wonder what's our plan for MIUs?
So to kick the conversation off, it's a temporary closure, not a permanent closure. It was caused by a staffing crisis where we did not have sufficient nurses. There were nurse-led units to run those units safely. So the staff then moved back into NDHT, where they worked in the ED department. My understanding now is the staff who were working basically largely in Bideford have moved on to other areas, other things. So it's now a challenge to reopen those units because of the nursing side of things. We've gone for a community-based local enhanced scheme for our GP practices, where they're providing a different but similar function, and that might be a model for the urgent care system throughout the whole of Devon. And I believe that's been looked at as one way of delivering this sort of care closer to people's homes. But it is a Devon-wide challenge. I agree with you.
Joe, look, you look like you're desperate to get in there. Joe, do you want to?
No, not desperate, but I just thought to answer Graham's question, so I don't think it's for a detailed conversation here really, but it is one of the key actions that we're taking as part of the Urgent Care Board to review provision of MIUs UTC. So it's priority action that we're looking at the moment.
Yeah, this is nothing new, is it? This struggle to get suitably qualified nursing staff who are willing to work in small community MIUs, because it's almost counterintuitive to the nature of people that want to train to be able to do that. What they're really interested in is being in a busy A&E department. So, you know, we had the similar thing in Dartmouth several years ago, didn't we? So Simon and then Susie, please.
I just wanted to come back on the Budley question. I have now found what's called a charitable incorporated organisation proposal, which has been circulated to myself and Chris Tidman at the RD&E. There is the figures in there, realize we're in public, so I won't talk about figures, but there's a projected shortfall in the first year, and there's a proposal here to work as the CCG with 3 other organisations to try and meet that shortfall. So I'll circulate that on to you, and we can look at that and see what we think of that proposal. But it came into me, obviously into Chris when I was on holiday last week. So it is a worked up, I guess, proposal for what could happen if the partners were able to work together.
Okay, great. Thanks, Simon. Susie.
Thank you, Nick. Just to say really how helpful it's been, I think, to have this very strong steer from the governing body. And I see the CCG as the board which has the most sort of system view, really, of all the boards in the system. But to have this steer that you do think that we should be minded as a system to devote, you know, a percentage, whatever 1% has been mentioned. It seems paltry, but of course, you know, 1% of a big budget is probably still quite a large sum of money. I mean, I see investing in this area as a sort of investor save approach, because we will be undoubtedly saving, and we're also investing to fill in some gaps that we've heard of between, you know, primary care sometimes and DPT. They are gaps in public provision which will enhance well-being in the county. So I just thank you very much for the steer ahead of the partnership board discussion next week. It's been really helpful.
Okay, thank you, Susie. Right, so moving on to the Western Locality. Sheila, is there anything you want to add to the report?
No, I think it's pretty much as read. It's very similar. In fact, probably the same as the Plymouth report, because they are working quite closely together at the moment. I think the overwhelming theme, really looking at what the key risks are, is workforce, and that's a difficult nut to crack, isn't it, as we've talked about earlier.
Yeah. Okay, any questions for Sheila? Susie, or is that a legacy hand? I'll take that as a legacy hand. Right.
Legacy hand.
Thank you. If we can then move on to the Assurance Committee Chairs reports, I'd like to take these as read, but just offer the chairs the opportunity, if they've got anything that they need to escalate to GB, to mention that. So Finance Committee, Graham, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to emphasise the recommendation that Governing Body has a presentation from John Dowell on funding and planning for the second half of the financial year. I'm sure that's non-controversial.
No, that's going to happen at the next meeting. It would have happened today, but John's on leave, and he's joined the meeting anyway whilst on leave, which is not good practice, and I didn't really want to ask him to do something else as well on his day off. So
great, thank you.
Why I've delayed it till the next meeting, which is only the end of this month, so it's only we'll be doing that in about 3 weeks' time. Okay, thanks. Primary care, Judy's not here, but I don't think there was anything that needed escalation, was there, Joe? No. Okay, and commissioning. Anything? No.
Nothing really. No.
No. Okay, thanks, Simon. And quality, Glynis.
Only the issue that I raised earlier about the impact of the reduction in elective surgery on community services and primary care, and also the potential for increasing inequalities in service provision. And I mean, that was a major issue of concern for the Quality Committee, and asked for governing body to be cited on that, but we have already had a discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you, Glynis. Okay, so that brings us, I think, to the end of the public meeting. Does anyone have any other business?